And here in northern Israel, it's sunny blue skies up in the north, near where there's a lot of action happening on the ground as well as online and in the markets. And we can see that there is, in fact, a tremendous amount of growth in the field and in the markets, and a lot of action. Now, what is happening with Bitcoin and crypto? Well, let's get right into it, shall we? Yesterday, we saw Bitcoin and crypto altcoins take a severe dump again, following the severe dump from the day before, but they didn't do so just straight down all day. In fact, many, if not most of them, actually went up a nice little amount, several percent, 3, 4, 5, 6%, some even more, before dumping out the same amount or more. Some dumped even, 10, 15, 20% by the end of the day. And if you look at the Alpha Trading live stream that we did yesterday in the Alpha Trading Discord, you'll notice that the downside targets pretty much got nailed. And I even gave you the probabilities to the upside and the downside and told you that the propensity of the probabilities was to the downside. Why? Well, because of how the information was looking across the volatility, the variance, the returns oscillator, and of course the entropy, among other things. So it was very much a case of do what the probabilities and statistics tell you, because the assets are going to do what the VEPs say, even if you don't think they will. Eventually, they're going to do what the VEPs is telling you. Right, the vast overwhelming majority of the time, price action just follows the returns. Yeah, you can have a candle here, a candle there, where it might not, but eventually it will fall back in line and do what the returns are doing. And yesterday was definitely a downward day as a result. And why does this matter? Well, I'll tell you why it matters. You would think, right, even though the presidential executive order from Trump last week that created or established this Bitcoin reserve, even though it didn't say that they would be buying Bitcoin, they basically said they're going to be stockpiling the Bitcoin that they already have and calling it the digital reserve. And even though they didn't indicate how they're going to acquire other alts that were named in this sort of the 5 majors, right? Solana, ETH, XRP, Cardano. They didn't say how they're going to acquire them. But obviously, presumably, any that they have confiscated, they'll use those in the stockpile as well. But how will they acquire more? Who knows? Maybe that's yet to be decided. And you would think that maybe, okay, market's priced it in, not a big deal, etc. And I am the first to tell you that news is not how we trade. Right? News is not something we trade on in low time frames. It just doesn't matter, right? What happens in the news is an after effect, right? Is a filling in of a narrative. Shalom. Hi. What you see reported in the news is after the fact of what happened in the markets, and then they just make the news story to fit that narrative of, oh, if the price went down, and they say the story like this. If the price went up, and they say the story like that. They give depending on which way the market goes, you'll get that angle from the particular reporter at the particular publication, and each of them has their own angle, and each of them has their own agenda. So some of them will tell you, X happened because the market went down. Others will tell you Y happened because the market went down. Some of them will tell you A happened because the market went up. Some will tell you B happened because the market went up. And you'll see conflicting reports even within the same publications, right? And so it's complete and utter nonsense. Yeah. There's a dog there. There's a really nice dog there. The moon dog. I got a moon dog over here. Very sweet. Anyway, so the point is, you would think that after news like that, if news actually did in any way dictate what's going on in markets, then that would be the number one thing that crypto has been waiting for since its inception as a scalable solution, since Bitcoin was launched in 2008, 2009. Right? Why? Well, because it's not just, first of all, it's not just that the United States government has done what it did. It's that there are already so many other governments and centralized banks and big banks and reasons, huge universities and endowment funds and hedge funds and you name it. There's no shortage of people and groups and organizations and governments that have already said they're going to invest money in Bitcoin. And you would think, really, that if any of them had done this, it would have given Bitcoin buyers and investors a reason to be like, well, they said they're investing in this, so we might as well, because these people have massive amounts of money. They're going to make this thing happen. Let's go. Let's acquire all we can get, right? And yet the reaction from the market has not been what people say it should be, quote unquote. By people, I mean the loudest talking heads in the space. Right? The reaction from the market has been, markets don't react. Markets act, narratives follow. Right? Just like returns lead, right? Or volatility leads, returns, are created from that volatility, and price action follows those returns. So by that same measure, right, if any government, especially a sizable one, especially any G8 government, right, already when France announced that you could use Bitcoin to pay bills, right, back in like 2000, whatever it was, 18 or something like that, already when they said that you could do that, that should have been big enough news to send the prices shooting through the roof, right? But it didn't, right? Why? Yeah, sure, funny, very funny with the French jokes. I get it, but why? Why didn't prices go shooting through? Because markets are not moved by what is said in the press. Markets are moved by the VEPs. It doesn't matter if you like that fact or not. It is a fact. Okay? And likewise, when other governments said that they would be acquiring, Bitcoin and other digital assets, why didn't the price go through the roof? Again, because markets are not determined by political actors. Markets are determined by the VEPs. It's really quite simple. So, how can it be that on the days following, literally the single biggest thing that investors said that they were waiting for, which was basically a seal of approval by the US that Bitcoin is a thing so valuable that it's worth putting their money into it, that the US government, not just some state, although that's also happening, right? States across the US are buying Bitcoin, right? Well, why are there not more days of massive price rallies than right now? Same thing. You would think that on the day that the President of the United States said that the U.S. would be buying Bitcoin, or it would be stockpiling the Bitcoin that it has into a national reserve, that prices would go through the roof, if you believe the news narrative. But it doesn't. And it hasn't. And we've seen the exact opposite. In fact, what we've seen is a very nice discount. And what I will tell you is, that's literally the VEPs moving the asset along. And if anything, it gives an opportunity to the smart money that has the ability and the funds ready to make purchases at some very nice discounted prices, in my opinion. Like, you got to remember, anything under 100 grand, if you're a bank or a government or a huge financial institution of any kind, even like an investment group from belonging to some university or a private company or whatever, you under 100 grand is really cheap, right? You know, you may not think that, and it certainly was a lot cheaper before. But again, anything under 100K, they consider to be cheap because it has already just enough of the beginnings of maturity. It's not mature, but it has the beginnings of maturity to be considered slightly less risky than the other alts, with still massive amounts of potential upside. So it's considered at less than 100K, basically a risk-free investment. And I'm not joking. Like, they literally, that's how it's considered, right? You speak to financial analysts at hedge funds, etc., who've analyzed crypto for years, they will tell you that at 100K or anything up to 100K, even up to $250,000, right? Between 50K or 70K and 250K, they consider it to be a safe investment, just like buying U.S. government bonds. You know, were once considered like the ultimate form of safe investment, right? And still are by many, even though they're entirely different now in many ways than they used to be, because of the whole. Anyway, so what does that mean, right? What is the thing to do now, right? Because what does it mean if we can't trust news about the U.S. government buying all the Bitcoin it can, or other, you know, or the U.S. government, stockpiling all the Bitcoin it has, and figuring out ways to acquire more? And we've already seen reports that the U.S. government is considering selling gold that it holds for Bitcoin. Now, let me put that into context for you. For the U.S. government to sell gold, which was once considered to be the denominator for money, right? The base by which all money is measured, and then the base from which all fiat currency was derived. For the U.S. government to consider selling gold in order to buy Bitcoin, you really need to take a moment to appreciate just how massive a move that is. That's not normal. That is far from normal. That is really the opposite of normal, okay? That is saying, okay, we recognize that Bitcoin is now the world's leading asset. Now, it may not be the most valuable asset on the record. It may not have the largest market cap. It may not have the widest adoption, etc. But in terms of its growth, and its acceleration, in terms of adoption, and in terms of its growth, in terms of its value to people over time, it is by far the number one asset on the planet. And the fact that the U.S. government recognizes this, hold on. The fact that the U.S. government recognizes that Bitcoin is the number one asset on the planet, and maybe you do or maybe you don't recognize that, but the U.S. government does, and that it is allocating or considering allocating gold, literal gold, from its gold stacks, of which it has obviously the largest gold stacks in the world, and that's why it can sustain the moniker of being the, you know, even though the dollar is not pegged to gold, the fact that it has so much gold makes the dollar very powerful and makes it possible for the U.S., in addition to its military power, to be called
the land of the U.S. dollar, which is the world currency reserve.
So you have to keep that in mind. These are things that affect real politics. These are things that affect real economy. These are things that affect millions and really billions of people around the world. And I'm not making light of it. This is not some kind of a haha, that's very funny. The U.S. is literally, right, the home of the world currency reserve. And that world currency reserve is going to be challenged at some point, and it already is. It's going to be challenged by Bitcoin. And when I say challenged, I mean there is going to come a point in time where people are going to make a choice. By people, I mean the average person. People are going to make a choice of whether they want to receive their salary in dollars or Bitcoin. And specifically dollars or Satoshis, because we know most people are never going to earn a whole Bitcoin in their life. Or if they do, it'll be spread out over many years. But they'll be earning Satoshis day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year. And there will come a time, very likely, and mark my words, where, and because the governments and big banks, etc., all own this stuff, and they own the vast majority of it, most people will be using Satoshis as their form of currency. I know, it sounds crazy. I know, you think it's crazy. I get it. I get you think it's nuts. But that is what it is. Right? You say, this is just some fantasy, you're a crypto degen, what are you talking about? Let me remind you that 16 years ago, right, in 2008, before Halloween, so most of 2008, there was no Bitcoin. And even in 2009, after it launched, those of us who were mining we were being laughed at for wasting electricity to mine a thing that nobody wanted, that had no value on the street before there were any exchanges. And all we could really do with it was barter with it with other Bitcoin users, which were far and few in between at the time. And those that would accept Bitcoin for anything, again, they understood the value of it for a variety of reasons, all of which are still valid reasons today, by the way, and all of which are some of the primary reasons that I still use it. Conducting certain transactions peer-to-peer is a lot more of a powerful thing than the words that explain it. Conducting peer-to-peer transactions may sound very benign to you, but it's actually extremely powerful. And by extremely powerful, I mean extremely powerful. It's not nearly as boring a sentence as it sounds. Oh, conducting peer-to-peer transactions, blah, 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 not interesting. It's actually super interesting and super powerful. And if you knew, you'd know. If you don't know, you should really look into it. If you don't know, you either don't know because you don't have access to the kind of funds required to do that. You don't have access to the kind of tasks necessary that are massively aided by having that. Or you probably live in a privileged bubble, God bless you, where you don't need to worry about that. And your system seems to work just fine. But here's the thing, at some point, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday and for the rest of your life, at some point, the system you enjoy now that protects your delicate behind is going to crumble. It does not matter if you believe me or not. I've been telling you since the end of 2008 that cryptocurrency is going to change things and that it is incredibly powerful stuff. And I've been telling you since 2009 that Bitcoin is going to change things and it's incredibly powerful stuff. And I've been telling you since 2010 and 2011 and all along the years. I have dropped little hints and big hints. I've dropped subtle information and massive information. And even in the last, 8, 10 years on my YouTube channel, I've been posting more and more information as time goes by about why Bitcoin and other leading cryptos are going to change the finances of the world. Maybe you've never seen it. Fair. Maybe you've never seen anybody talk about it. I don't know how that's possible, but possible. I mean, I do know how it's possible, but it's... If you're watching YouTube in 2025 and you never heard of Bitcoin, bro, like, what are you doing? Do you ever pay attention to anything happening in the world around you? I'm not asking if you're a news junkie. I'm not asking if you're constantly watching for every little development in the news. No. Do you ever even look at the headlines of any news website or anything? I get you probably don't read newspapers. I get it. Well, most people don't read newspapers anymore, like printed newspapers. I get it. I mean, that's how it goes. I get you might not watch the nightly news. I get you might not listen to radio news on a regular basis. But even just the main headline, even if all you heard or saw was the first headline in the business section or even the main section, on so many occasions in the last 6 and you literally heard that Bitcoin is this new money and whatever, it never occurred to you to even look into it. Just look into it. Do some research. It never occurred to you? All right, so what should you do now? Well, if you watch my channel, which you know, who watch my channel are usually new viewers or whatever. And the vast majority of people who watch anything I post, they see a few seconds and they disappear forever from my channel because, I don't know, you don't like the production value or something. Oh, no, I didn't make my videos shiny enough and simple enough for your simple mind. Oh, poor thing. Sorry, I'm not going to apologize for not being hung up on production value of a video. What matters to me is getting the information out more than where am I filming it. Oh no, why are you filming when you're walking around? It's noisy outside. We can hear you, but there's background noise. Yeah, so what? I live in the world. I've been telling you for years and years and years. And I used to make videos just only sitting at my desk, right? With limited, but minimalist production value with graphics and chyrons and all this other stuff. You guys didn't pay attention then. Right? You didn't pay attention when I made graphics, videos with sections, videos with titles, subtitles, all kinds of stuff, right? You didn't pay attention then. You didn't care. So why should I put the effort into making massive production for you guys now? What matters more is the message. So what should you do now? If now suddenly, for whatever reason, your interest has been piqued. What should you do to get into crypto if you wanted to? First, go read the Bitcoin white paper. Go to the Bitcoin website, which is, you can Google it, just search for the official Bitcoin website, and you'll see that the website for Bitcoin is bitcoin.org, bitcoin.org, right? Org for organization. And on there, you can read the Bitcoin white paper. I used to distribute it, and I still do on some of my websites about crypto, but better you just go read it from the source, okay? As we say in crypto, don't trust, verify. Okay? So go read the actual white paper, download it for free from the Bitcoin website. Read it. It's not long. It's like 7 pages. It's really not long. And it's not very complicated. Satoshi Nakamoto did a brilliant job of putting together the Bitcoin white paper. It's really something that anybody with even a middle school education can understand. I mean, frankly, even elementary school kids understand it if you explain it to them, and if they've learned those topics or before, or if you just explain to them the very simple math stuff that's in there. It's really not complicated, but it will give you a massive insight into Bitcoin that most people, sadly, do not have because they refuse to learn a thing. Go read the Bitcoin white paper. Go read about, you can read about the Bitcoin standard if you want. You can read about hyper-Bitcoinization. You can follow us at Alpha Trading if you want to learn how to trade it, right? Because you don't trade according to what 99.9999% of people are telling you to do. They're telling you insane things because they've never worked in a high-frequency trading firm, and they make their money, if they're YouTubers or whatever media system they use, if they're shilling their technical analysis using traditional technical analysis, they're making their money from you depositing money on exchanges through their affiliate links, and from you losing your money when you trade on those exchanges. That's how they make money. You may not like to hear it, but that's a fact. Most of the YouTubers, and I say YouTubers in general, it includes the people who shill on X and Telegram and elsewhere. Most of the YouTube Jimmies, they don't actually trade. They'll tell you they trade, but they don't really trade. Even if they show you real trades, they have another account that has trades to the opposite direction so that they can show you a winning trade one way or the other, which basically means they're holding net neutral on their trading. And if they're lucky, if anything, they're probably losing a bit of money on their trading, but they're making money on the shilling of their technical analysis tools and courses and psychology and all this BS. But you can learn how to trade properly. It doesn't have to be, of course, just Bitcoin. You can trade anything if you learn the proper way to trade. I use the VEPs, right? The volatility, entropy, probabilities, and statistics. That's how you trade properly. That's how the high-frequency trades, high-frequency trading firms or HFT firms, that's how they run the markets. Right? They run the vast, overwhelming percentage of all the trades on all markets, on all assets, on any time frame. They run 70 to 90% of all trades on all markets. How do they do that? They have massive bots that run millions of trades per second. When you consider there's about 50 million people in the world who trade, and a very small number of them, maybe a couple 100,000 of them or so, maybe a million, so like 1 or 2% of the people in trading work at actual HFT firms as traders. When you consider that fact, you start to understand the numbers of, oh, okay, that's why they're called the smart money, and the other 99% are literally called the dumb money.
And the dumb money traders, like, haha, they joke about it. Oh, we're the dumb money. Haha. They think we're the dumb money, but we'll show them. They'll, dumb money traders think that they will always beat the market. You're not going to beat the market. The only way to have any chance of beating the probability that you're going to get correct as a trader is to trade the VEPs. Statistically, that is a proven fact. Okay? And you can try to build bots. You can build bots that can do millions of trades per second. But the amount of resources required to sustain a network of servers that can actually do that properly, and if you run a trade that can do, if you want to make a bot that runs trillions and millions of trades per second without actually using the VEPs, but using traditional TA, you're going to lose money. The HFT firms do not touch traditional TA. They shill that stuff down the line. They're the ones who, if anything, pay influencers to get that crap into your head. It's the HFT firms that make sure that all the other exchanges that promote trading and all the influencers and analysts and news people, et cetera, all the way down the line to you, use Voodoo TA, because they know that that's how they keep the game rigged in their favor. They keep telling you and pushing new bad indicators on you. They keep pushing new fake volatility indicators. They don't, when you hear the word volatility and you think you're being smart about it, the vast majority of the time, people who tell you about volatility in trading have no idea what it is. They think it's price-based. Volatility of price when the price moves up and down a lot. No, that's not what volatility is. If you've ever watched my videos talking about trading, volatility is, can I hear you say it? Volatility is the standard deviation of returns. The what? Yes. Specifically, the standard deviation of log returns on investment. I know it's a mouthful, but it rolls right off the tongue after you say it a million times. The standard deviation of log returns on investment, also just known as the standard deviation of returns, or STDEV, or sigma. Standard deviation of returns. That's volatility in trading. Another way to put it is volatility is the spread or the distance between the ask and bid. That distance is called delta. That delta is the delta around the mean of returns. So the spread of data, the delta around the mean of returns, is also known as variance. Variance is just another way of saying volatility. That's how the markets are run. You can also say entropy has a big impact. Yes, it does. Entropy and volatility are similarly impactful and similarly predictive of what assets are going to do on the current candle and the next candles. Anyway, there's a whole lot more you can learn by going to our lovely Discord server at alphatraడింghq.com/Discord. Again, alphatraడింghq.com/Discord, where you can learn from a group of expert traders who actually trade with the VEPs and have been doing it for a bunch of years. And we literally have developed new tools that the market does not even have, but we created them, and they are incredibly powerful, and they are predictive tools about what is probably going to happen in the future, and they are right. So what do we do about the fact that Bitcoin and crypto has crashed now? Well, on the low time frames, it's already starting to bounce, right? Just because it went down a little bit is not a reason to lose your brain. Like, Bitcoin didn't drop that hard. It went to a low of 76.7. Oh, but it was up at 83. Yeah, and it can go, it can go to zero, right? Is it likely to? No. Is 76.7 or even now where it is at 80.3K? Is that a good deal? Again, I reiterate, if you're an investor and you see Bitcoin at 80K when it was over 100 and was about 100 and you are an investor, right? And you thought it was a safe investment at 108K. Why would it not be a safe investment at 80K? Massive, like 25%, this sub 80. I mean, you just got a huge discount. You think it's just going to keep dropping forever? Really? I mean, the price literally went down 28%, even more. But let's just call it 28% from the high. You're going to tell me somehow, well, we're having a bear market now, we're going to have a recession, the price is going to go down to zero. Okay. Again, if you're an investor or a short-term trader, then you have different strategies. If you're an investor, you're holding long-term. If you're managing a proper investment portfolio, whether you get Bitcoin at 80K or 50K or 40K, if you're DCAing, it doesn't matter. If you're a trader, you're trading low time frames, it doesn't matter. There's a lot of volatility happening right now. That's what we want as volatility traders. We want the volatility. We want the price to drop and be in that short. We want the price to pump and be in that long. You understand? We don't care which direction it goes. So that's what you can do about it. You can be not left out in the cold. In 5-10 years, when there's a pretty high probability that Bitcoin will be worth not hundreds of thousands of dollars, but millions of dollars, you will kick yourself knowing you could have bought little tiny bits of a Bitcoin called Satoshis for, pennies. I mean, you can literally get Satoshis for pennies right now. In fact, how many Satoshis per dollar right now? Let's see the Satoshi calculator. Right now, if you wanted to buy like 50,000 Satoshis, it would cost you $40. So one Satoshi right now gets you about 1,244. $1 gets you 1,244 Satoshis. $1. That means if you put away $10, you could have 12,440 Satoshis. $10. And what would that do? When Satoshis flip the dollar, which again is very probably going to happen, and you might laugh at it now, but people also laughed at the idea of the dollar not being pegged to gold. And then that happened. And people laughed at the idea of the dollar pegging the British pound. And then that flipping the British pound. And then that happened. Money changes over time. The thing people put value on changes over time. The dollar is not going to be the preeminent world currency forever, as much as you might like it to be. It's just not going to be, right? Fiat currency typically lasts 20 to 30 years. The US dollar's fiat currency is now well over 50 years old. And really, the beginning of that whole episode with the dollar started back in 1913, so more than 100 years ago already. So that's a very long time for a currency that was pegged to gold and then became pegged to paper gold and then became pegged to the word of the US government. And even during that time, it's had three phases: pegged to gold, pegged to paper gold, pegged to the word of the fiat government. If you take 100 years divided by 3, just to give you a mean average, you get roughly 33 to 30 years, or a little bit more, because it's been 113 years, 112 years. So 37 years. That's a very long time for each of those phases to exist, especially for the fiat part. For the gold part, when it's directly tied to gold, okay, it was tied to gold, so it had a particular value. Fine, no problem. When it's tied to paper gold, a little bit shakier, but still tied to paper gold. So it had a specific value. Since it went to fiat, and that's been more than half of this 100-year period, literally since 1971, almost half, because it started in 71, right? So pretty much half and half. In the first half, you had real gold and the paper gold with the US dollar issued by the Federal Reserve, right? Because before that, there were dollars in the United States, but they weren't issued by the Federal Reserve, right? If you don't know about that, you should look into that. The Federal Reserve has not always been around printing money for the United States. The Federal Reserve was a creation in the early part of the 20th century to prevent the United States economy from collapsing. And so the bankers that ran the big banks got together and decided, hey, we are going to fix this problem by creating this Federal Reserve and issuing the US dollar to the United States government. That's what happened, right? Literally over a weekend. And those banks still run the Federal Reserve. They are still on the board of the Federal Reserve. They still pick who is the chairman, who is the candidate to be nominated as the next candidate for chairman of the Federal Reserve, that the U.S. Senate then, has to confirm by voting. Right? First, they have a committee, meet the person and ask them questions and go over their credentials, etc., see if they're qualified, and then they vote on it. Of course, with politics being the way it is, it's a whole separate story of whether or not they actually choose qualified people. But at the moment, they're still doing that for the Federal Reserve, by the Federal Reserve, which is why people say the Federal Reserve is above the law in the United States and makes its own rules and is really in charge of the United States government. Now, I don't view that as a conspiracy theory. It's a fact that the United States government does not apply the same laws to the Federal Reserve that it applies to other organizations. That's a fact. It's a well-documented fact. And Federal Reserve chairmen have said as much. Like, people who are the chairman of the Federal Reserve have said as much. And people who are the chairman of the New York branch of the Federal Reserve, which is the organization that really runs the Federal Reserve, because they are the most important bankers in America. They're on Wall Street. That's in New York, if you didn't know. They're the ones who actually run the banks, right? And they're the ones who actually choose the Washington, D.C. sort of headquarters chairman of the Federal Reserve, of the national organization that meets with Congress and meets with the president and all that kind of stuff. But the guy in D.C. is just taking marching orders from the people in New York. So let's just be clear about that, right? It's not a conspiracy theory. It's blatantly open information you can find on the Federal Reserve website if you know how to read information. They're not hiding it. It's not you sound like a conspiracy. No, I'm not a conspiracy theorist. It's just a fact. You can go and read it on their website in plain English. They explain to you how the Federal Reserve operates. And if you understand English, you can understand what it means when they tell you how they operate. So anyway, not to go off on too much of a tangent, but my point is, if you think the dollar is going to be around forever and have its global reserve currency status not challenged forever, given all things happening in the world, given the fact that Bitcoin is literally challenging the US dollar, I don't know what to tell you. You're kidding yourself. And you're causing your future self harm. And you're causing your future children, maybe if you have kids already, you're causing your children and your children's children and your children's children's children and so on and so forth. You're causing your future harm by ignoring Bitcoin and other leading cryptos, but specifically Bitcoin more than anything. But it doesn't even okay, so say you feel like, I can't get enough crypto because all the whales own it. Listen, I don't like the fact that the whales own most of it. I have been against that from the beginning. I would prefer it if no whales or governments ever had any. But that's not reality. It was always the case that whales and governments would own this stuff. It was always it was inevitable because of the way the protocol exists, the way that it doesn't block certain organizations and entities from having any, right? The way that it's basically open, in a sense, it was open for anyone to own. Now, it's largely controlled by organizations that will probably never sell any of it. And if they do, they'll sell the tiniest slivers of it. And you think that it's too late to get any Bitcoin. Okay, well, arguably it's not too late to get any Bitcoin. There still is some on the market. You can still buy some. Second of all, the President of the United States created a digital asset reserve, which will include Ethereum, XRP, Cardano, and Solana. So you have the 5 majors of crypto right there for you. Even me, who has been saying for years, Litecoin is going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. And there's going to be a Litecoin ETF that people want, etc. Litecoin is amazing. It is highly undervalued. And I personally believe Litecoin will be included in that digital reserve at some point. And at the moment, it's the under the radar coin because it's basically another version of Bitcoin that is just as good as Bitcoin and only has 4 times as many coins as Bitcoin and is currently trading at about 1,000th of the price of Bitcoin, maybe a little bit more now because Bitcoin's fallen off. But so 0.000105 or whatever. I mean, it's ridiculously cheap, like $100 a coin, right? What is actually the price of Litecoin right now? Let me go take a look because at this very moment, I'm not looking at the price chart. Litecoin right now, $87. Yeah, it's literally like 1,000th of the price of a Bitcoin, right? And Bitcoin right now is Litecoin $87, Bitcoin $80,000. It's like practically what you can almost get 1,000 Litecoin for 1 Bitcoin. And there's only 4 times as many Litecoin as Bitcoin. So I personally think it's highly undervalued and will at some point be much more valuable in terms of perceived value on a monetary scale. But it doesn't matter what I believe. Especially now. Now there is literally going to be, there already is, a digital asset reserve with Ethereum, Solana, XRP, and Cardano. Those are the 4 altcoins you can go get. And know that the US is stockpiling as much of those things as it can. How many tech stocks does the US stockpile and tell you about? I'm not talking about the Fed. We know the Fed owns massive amounts of the market. We get it. We know that Citadel and Vanguard and BlackRock BlackRock Vanguard, and State Street own like 88% of the market. We know that. How many individual stocks does the U.S. government hold? Does the U.S. government hold Apple shares? Do they hold Netflix shares? Do they hold Meta shares? Do they hold Google shares? They may have contracts with these companies. They may be investors in these companies on the back end. But do they go on the market and buy shares of Meta on a daily basis, the U.S. government? No. Do they have a reserve set aside of shares of a digital company or a high-tech company of any kind? A reserve, right? It's like a treasure box that you stuff with as much stuff as you can, and you never touch it. The U.S. has, I think, more than 1 or 2 billion pounds of cheese. I think it's 1.5 billion pounds, roughly, of cheese in some caves somewhere, underground storage facilities or whatever, in case of a pandemic that causes all the cheese to be bad. I don't know what, right? They have billions of pounds of cheese. Why? It's a reserve in case of an emergency, like a nuclear holocaust or whatever. The U.S. government has oil in reserves. And no, the Biden government didn't deplete the oil reserves to nothing. That's not a thing. He used some of it. He wasn't the first person to ever use the emergency reserve of oil, by the way. And by the way, the U.S. has so much oil that is pumping oil out of the ground at record rates since many years already. It is the world's leading producer of oil, more than Saudi Arabia, more than Russia, more than Venezuela. The United States pumps more oil out of the ground since years and years and years already than it ever has, and more than anybody ever has in history. So when people say, "Oh, the U.S. barely, is exporting all of its oil to foreign governments, and why is gas so high and so costly in America?" Gas is costly in America because of the oil cartels, including the American companies that refuse to make the price go down. They refuse to charge less. Do you know why? Because they can. That's the reason. If you're going to get mad at anybody for making the price of gas high, it's not a politician, left or right. It's the executives at the oil companies who charge you whatever they can. They're on countless recordings saying this. Countless recordings saying, yeah, absolutely, we charge whatever we can because we can. And it's not just gas. Plenty of consumer goods that you buy, food, clothes, whatever, things you buy day to day to live, many, many, many of those things spiked up in price in the last 5 years, more than usual. Price always goes up because of inflation, because the Fed keeps printing dollars, so they keep devaluing the dollar. So it costs you more dollars to buy the same thing next year than it did this year. That's the Fed's fault. Bitcoin fixes that, by the way. And so do other cryptos that have a limited supply, a fixed cap supply, a maximum cap supply. That fixes that. You can't just print more Bitcoin. Therefore, you can't just inflate the price of things for no reason. And if anything, the price of things goes down over time in terms of the amount of Bitcoin you need to pay for something. In 2009, to buy a house with a Bitcoin would have cost you millions of Bitcoins. In 2016, it would have cost you 100 Bitcoin. When it went up to 20 grand, you would have maybe gotten a house from anywhere from 10 to 50, Bitcoin, depending on 10 to 100 Bitcoin, depending on how fancy your house was. Now you can get a house for anywhere from, there are many places where you can buy more than one house for $80,000, by the way. Not everywhere is as expensive as cities in America. You know, you can get a house for, let's say you buy a $500,000 house, now you need 5 Bitcoin for it. 5.5, because the price is at 80K right now. Discount, party time. You get $1 million house for 12 Bitcoin. Think about that. The price, the cost of the amount of Bitcoin you need to spend to get things keeps decreasing. If I sell something to you in Bitcoin today and you say, how much is $100 worth of that? And I give it to you, I give you the price in Bitcoin. It's going to be a very small amount relative to the price of a Bitcoin nowadays. 10 years ago, 12 years ago, it would have been like, yeah, you need to send me half a Bitcoin, or you need to send me a whole Bitcoin, or you need to send me 2 Bitcoin, et cetera, et cetera. It's the opposite with your fiat currency. Over time, you're spending more for the same crap. So, and again, you can, and you know these 5 majors, Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, XRP, and Cardano, you know these 5 majors are all in U.S. reserves, meaning the U.S. intends to hold them and not just blast them out. They intend to hold them as a strategic reserve, break in case of emergency, break glass in case of emergency situation. They're not going to touch these things. They're going to hold them as a strategic reserve, the same way they hold gold as a strategic reserve asset. Because if the dollar's not pegged to gold, why do they need to hold the gold? Why do they just sell it? They don't sell it because they know it has value. They know it has value. So they keep it. It's worth keeping a warehouse and paying some security guards to secure the place. It's worth it. Doesn't matter if the asset is gold or cheese or water or Bitcoins. They know it's worth keeping some of each of these things. People need water to live. People need fuel to live. People need cheese. Well, not if you're lactose intolerant, but people need Bitcoins, just like they need gold. And yes, people need Bitcoins, and they need Ethereum and XRP and Solana and Cardano. And again, you might hate any of those. You might think they're all garbage. It does not matter what you think. It doesn't matter that I think Ethereum is a freaking gas scam. Okay, that it's ridiculous, and that is basically a tool for those that have infinite money at huge organizations like banks and massive corporations that don't care about if they spend $500 on a transaction fee to send $100 to test something. They don't care. What do they care? They say, oh, okay, $600 for the transaction, whatever. They don't care. They don't care if they have to spend $5,000 to send a $50 thing to test something. They don't care. They have infinite money. What do they care? When I say they have infinite money, I mean, these are the companies and organizations that get money from the Fed whenever the Fed prints money. These are the huge organizations, the huge banks, the governments. What do you think they care? You think they care if they spend a little bit of extra money on transaction fees? They don't give a damn. But you know what those 5 strategic reserve assets are. The government has told you. It doesn't matter if you like the government or not. It does not matter. You know those are the 5. Why am I rambling on about this? I'm rambling on about it because it's March 2025, for God's sake. You literally know what the strategic asset reserves are for the future of money. For the next 50 to 200 years, probably, at least. Right? These, maybe even 300 or more years. These types of changes in the financial system where a new asset class is created, they don't happen every 20 to 50 years. You will probably never see something like this again in your lifetime. I'm almost sure of it.
I say almost because I deal in probabilities, and there's always a probability that something will happen. But you will probably never see a new asset class of this significance ever created again in your lifetime. And probably your children won't either. And probably your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren and your great-great-grandchildren won't either. It will probably be at least a few hundred years before humanity moves beyond the crypto standard and goes to something even better. Whatever that might be. And you can say, well, there's AI. AI is going to solve everything. Well, until AI solves everything, and I don't think it's going to solve everything, until it solves everything, it ain't solving anything. Sure, it's wonderful for certain tricks. It's useful for sure.
But it's not a new financial asset class. Even there are AI cryptocurrencies, right? AIs that are tied to cryptocurrency in some way, or cryptocurrencies that are tied to AI in some way. But they're part of the crypto space. We're not treating them as valuable assets just because they're AI. Now you can say, well, there's AI stocks. Okay, there's companies that are selling AI products, but they're not an entire asset class. They're stocks. So again, you have your roadmap. It's very simple. Acquire as much of the 5 coins that the United States government, still the world's superpower, still the world's biggest arsenal, still the world's biggest economy, is literally telling you they are stockpiling. It doesn't matter if you like the idea or not. It doesn't matter if you think all of those coins are scams. It doesn't matter. The United States government, the thing you trust to put value to the fiat dollars that you like, or that you use, or that your currency is pegged to in some way, that government is buying those 5 assets. They've stockpiled the ones they already have, and they're going to continue to acquire more. And if you don't think they're going to, you're not reading the room. It doesn't matter if Trump said, here's how we're going to acquire more Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana and XRP and Cardano. It doesn't matter that he didn't give details. It can trickle out, like they trickled out the news that they're going to sell gold for Bitcoin. So they're literally going to sell one of their assets in their reserves, gold, which people always thought, oh, they're never going to sell their gold. No, they're going to sell their gold. It turns out they're going to sell their gold for Bitcoin. So it doesn't matter if you like the idea of cryptocurrency. It doesn't matter if you believe all the trash you've been watching saying, oh, crypto is a scam and it's only for criminals. And you believe that fear and uncertainty and doubt because you watch all that media crap on those mainstream news channels and mainstream documentary channels. And you believe all that crap. Fiat is responsible for far more criminal activity than any, government issued money is the money people have used for crimes forever. So when people say, oh, crypto is all scams, excuse me, but the amount of crime happening with regular money is so much vastly more than the amount of criminal activity happening with crypto. It's not even funny. Why? Oh, guess what? With Bitcoin and Ethereum and Solana and Cardano and XRP, those are cryptocurrencies that you can track the movements of the assets from wallet to wallet, which gives law enforcement a much better handle on figuring out whose wallet is whose and how to find criminal activity and how to stop it. Did you know that? You didn't know that? It's a fact. The Fed actually likes Bitcoin. I mean, the feds, sorry, the federal authorities, law enforcement in the United States like Bitcoin. When they busted Silk Road, they were glad that it was a Bitcoin user using a platform, Bitcoin-friendly platform. Why? Because they knew that with Bitcoin, they could track the activities of Bitcoin. Yes, there's pseudonymity, and if you're really good at it, and if you know what you're doing, you don't screw up, it can be anonymous effectively. But you can still track the transactions, and there are things that can be done about that. That's one of the ways that they gathered a lot of the Bitcoins that they're sticking into their stockpile. And no, don't expect Ross to get all of his Bitcoins back. If you're a person who was rooting for him to get out of prison and now you're happy he got out of prison, it doesn't mean they're going to give him back all of his crypto, his Bitcoins. He got a pardon from the president, which means an admission of guilt. And he was forgiven for that admission of guilt. So they don't have to give him back his Bitcoins because he admitted being guilty. They're not going to reward him for doing something that he admits he was wrong to do. Because that's how you get a pardon. So anyway, you know the 5 coins. I'm done rambling on about this today. Right now, Bitcoin is moving not super fast, but nice enough. It's at 80,455. I think when we started this live stream a little while ago, when I started this, it was at 8,300. So it's gone up, $160 in the last hour or so. I honestly just want to emphasize again, last thing, do your homework. Don't be at the bus stop without a bus ticket, so to speak. Don't get left in the dust. If you've watched this video, if you watched this far, my God, congratulations. It's amazing. Thank you. I'm glad that you have, and I hope that you've learned something from it more than anything. And if you haven't, please, again, go do your research. Go learn about the Bitcoin white paper. Go read about the Bitcoin hyper Bitcoinization. Go read about the Bitcoin standard and all that other stuff and whatever. But most importantly, read the Bitcoin white paper. If you want to learn how to trade, come to the Alpha Trading Discord, like I said. We'll tell you how to trade. And we'll tell you how not to trade. And we'll tell you don't lose money in this. And you can do it, and it's all for free. We will tell you this for free. There are things you can pay for, including tutoring, where I, myself, or Bilbo will personally teach you how to trade. But you don't need to pay for it. I mean, you can if you're the type of person who likes the personal one-on-one tutoring stuff and it's easier for you and it gets you up and running faster. But most importantly, you can learn all the stuff we give away for free, completely for free. You can watch our live streams completely for free. You can participate in the live stream. We're not just shoveling information out at you. We're inviting you to engage. All the big YouTube jimmies, they don't do that. Sometimes they'll engage a little bit with their chat. Some people do that. With their during the live stream, they'll answer some text questions or here and there. But it's not full participation. They don't literally sit there and have conversations that last sometimes 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes. Like half the live stream will be a conversation with somebody in the live stream that isn't me or Bilbo, right? Some other person in the community will just start a conversation and we'll just flow with that. Because if that's a topic that people want to talk about, we'll talk about it. If it has to do with trading, especially, right? So you can learn all this stuff for free. You can learn all about different cryptos for free, completely for free. Just go to the Discord, alphatradinghq.com/Discord, right? alphatradinghq.com/Discord. If that's too much to remember, just go to alphatradinghq.com. alphatradinghq.com and click on the Discord link. It's that simple. That's it for now, folks. Hope to see you in the next one. And remember, our streams start at 11 a.m. Monday through Saturday. It did not occur to me that the U.S. clocks would spring forward in winter, but they did. So anyway, AM U.S. Eastern Time as normal within the live streams. And I will catch you guys later. Happy trading. Peace.